Okay, there we go. All right, now we'll go back to Chrome. Okay, so yeah, you'll have a recording of this as well. But this T-test on Windows and T-test on Mac is kind of a walkthrough again on how to install uh, this data analysis program. Um, so the rubric, again, I added that kind of the last minute, but that's ideally what you want to strive for. Again, as long as you do this, I'm not really going to follow the rubric. As long as you've got a decent looking graph, a proper null and alternative hypothesis statement, you should get pretty much an A on this. Okay. um, I just put this up here just because I have it. So the book one raw data is where the actual numbers are going to come from. So you want to download that, and that should download as an Excel file. So this is kind of weird. What you actually see here is a little bit different than the actual Excel file. Um, but you've got two columns of data, the non-rural county death rate and the rural county death rate, just NR and R. So if you open up the Excel, give it a second to open. Why do I need to show that? Open, okay. Now, resume share, let's see, new share, and that's Excel. Okay, so now, are you guys seeing the Excel file? Just to make
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so I just got to make sure because every time I open up a new file, the Zoom sticks to what I share originally. So again, I'm on a Mac at the moment, but you should be able to go over here to data up at the top. And if you don't have the data analysis pack over here on the right, then how you install that is you go all the way to your higher level menu way up here at the top. You may have to hover at the top of your window, go to Tools, Excel Add-ins, and click on that, and you want to add the analysis tool pack. Okay, just click that, click OK, and then data analysis should show up over here on the side. Um, my experience with Mac is you should not have to restart Excel for that to show up, but sometimes with Windows, if you have a Windows machine, you might have to restart it. You know, Windows is a little bit different. Again, I'm not on a Windows machine, but if you go back to that Windows walkthrough t-test, if you go to Windows in your upper left, I think there's a little green Excel type logo. If you click on that, then it should bring you a green bar menu on the left hand side, and you go all the way down. You might have to scroll, but you go all the way down. The last thing on there is options, I believe, and if you click on options, that should come up with another menu. And again, you want to look for Excel add-ins, and it says like tool pack, and it may have a tool pack VBA type thing. You want to check on those. You've got to close and then go back again to that same menu, bring up that green menu on the left, go down under options, and then you have to go down towards the bottom. You have to go to manage, and you have to actually turn on that tool pack. So you have to go down to manage, click on the Excel add-ins, and then it should show up. Again, you may have to close Excel and reopen it for the data analysis to show. So just be aware you might have to do that for Windows. Okay, so to do the actual t-test, now if you guys remember like doing the sum of squares and all that stuff, this is basically done for us. So you click on that data analysis, and you want to do the t-test to sample assuming equal variances. Okay, that's the test you use. Just click OK, and you've got two variables. Okay, one variable is going to be your non-rural, the other variable is going to be your rural. So the range for the variables, you make sure your cursor is blinking in variable one range, and you go through, and it doesn't matter which one you select for variable 1 or 2, just remember. But just whichever one you select for variable 1, select all the numbers for that column. Whoa, go back up. So select all the cells that have numbers in it, and that should show up as like A2 to A52. So that'll tell you the cell numbers that you just selected there. Click in the variable 2 range, and you do the same thing for the rural. And again, even if there's a 0 in that cell, you want to select that, because 0, I mean, that's data. So you select all those cells. And again, that should tell you, you know, the cell names B2 to B109. And that's it for this one. So you click OK. And what that will do, if you look down here in the bottom left, sheet 1 has got your raw data, and it's opened up a second sheet with the results of your t-test. And go down here, and you can zoom in a little bit in that bottom, the bottom right, and you've got your t-test results here. So you've got your 2 means for variable 1. Remember, if is your non-rural counties, so your death rate average, your death rate mean in the non-rural counties is 14.1. Again, this is per 100,000 people, and the death rate mean in your rural counties is 4.86. Okay, so I'll just tell you, there's quite a bit of difference there. So when you do your t-test, your t-value is here under t-stat, that is 5.45. Your number of observations, the italic N, is, so we've got 51 non-rural counties and 108 rural counties in Georgia. And the total degrees of freedom, remember degrees of freedom is N-1. So if we took 50, which is N-1 plus 107, we would have 157 counties. And is that somebody joining, or I think it was my email? I just got a little ding. Probably just got a new email. But anyway, don't worry about this other stuff. The only values we need is our t-value and our 2 means, 14.1 and 4.8. Okay. So again, this is a little bit different on the Windows machine. So like I said, go back to Canvas and check out those 2 walkthroughs. But basically, how you produce a chart, you want to make sure that you don't have any of these cells clicked. Okay, when you start off, you want to click over here to an empty cell when you go to select your chart. Otherwise, you'll get some weird results, and it'll assume you're using that data. So make sure you click into an empty cell first. Go up to the top under Insert, and go over to about the middle, and you want your first set of charts. You want your column chart, and you just want a 2D column chart, just the first set there. And so again, the process is a little bit different between Mac and Windows. Mac, I think I think it's control click, or do your little double finger click if you're on a finger pad. If you're on a Windows, I think it's just a right click, but you should get a menu where you have a select data. Okay, this is the one you want here, is select data. Okay, now you click on that, and here's where you select the data that's going to go into the chart. So the chart data range. Now remember, anything that says a range is usually going to be more than 1 cell. So we want to basically just compare our 2 means. Okay, so the chart data range, again, make sure your cursor's blinking in that one, and then you go down here to the chart and select, and then again you select and drag, or click and drag, and you want to select both these cells with the 2 means. Okay. And again, that should say sheet 2, cell B4, which is this one here, and then cell C4, which is the other mean. Okay, so you've got the 2 means, your chart data range. The other thing you want is horizontal axis labels. You want your 2 variable numbers. So you select, again, this one, make sure your cursor is blinking in that, and then you select the 2 cells that have variable 1 and variable 2, just the names. Okay, you do that and click OK. and then it starts off a little basic chart. So since we selected these two cells, if you notice down here at the bottom, it says variable 1 and variable 2. Well, that doesn't tell us anything. We want to change these to reflect what we saw with our data, non-rural and rural. But since we selected the cells, we go up here in the cell and double click in the cell and change the name in the cell. And once you select the name in the cell and change it, it changes the name on your graph. Okay, so we've linked this cell to the graph title. So you do the same thing with your other one. And so now we've got our two axes, or two columns labeled. Chart title, you should be able to just click on that, and again, just kind of name it something descriptive. Yeah, something like that. So the other thing I want you to add, again, this is a little bit different between Windows and Mac. If you have Windows, if you click on your graph over here on the upper right, you'll see these two little, I think there's 3 different types of boxes. One will allow you to add chart elements. And so you do that this way on Windows. But if you're doing it on a Mac, you click on the chart itself. And you notice once you click on the chart, this border becomes a double line, and you've got little handles here so you can resize it. But click on the chart itself, and you should be able to go up at the top and select Chart Design. And you select that and go to the very left, Add Chart Element. And you want an axis title. You want a primary vertical axis. So we'll add our chart title here on the right. And if you remember what these numbers are, remember this is the drug overdose death rate mean. And again, it's per 100,000 people. So just label, that the vertical axis, something like that. Drug overdose death rate mean per 100,000. Okay, so that's telling us in the non-rural counties, we had per 100,000 people, we had an average of a little over 14 people die from drug overdose death rates in 2017. In the rural counties, we had almost 5. And we can just tell that from looking, okay, wherever the graph lies, halfway between 4 and 6. So the other thing you can add, you don't have to. I personally liked it and I added it on mine. Again, go up to Chart Design and add Chart Element. Was data labels. Again, you don't have to. You can add them in the center, which I think the best one looked like it was the outside end that tells you at the top the exact precise mean of that column. Again, that's an optional thing, but I think it looks good. And that's really all you need for your chart. Okay, so that's it for the chart. Just a meaningful title. Make sure your 2 columns correlate with what the means should be. And I had a couple people in some of the other sections submit some of these, and I looked at their chart and they had some really wonky numbers. I think some of them either downloaded data from maybe 2018, or maybe they use the variances. I'm not 100% sure. But when you select the chart data range, remember you go to if you go to select data, remember your chart data range, this one up here should be your 2 means. Okay, not the variance. I think somebody selected the variance in one of them, but make sure you get the proper cells selected. So just make sure it makes sense. Okay, now let's go back to Canvas for just a second. and go back to the home page. So the other thing you want to kind of download and look at, well, okay, let's look at this right here real quick. We'll talk about this, the critical value table. So I just put this up here so we could compare. And if you look at the top is the significance level. Remember, we talked about 5%, so we use 0.05. And again, different people can use different percentages. If you want to be really sure, you can say, I want to be 1% or 0.1 percent sure that remember we said there's, so with the 5%, what that's saying is there's a 5% chance that the difference in the two means could be due to error or random sampling error or something like that. You could even be more sure and say, I want to be 1% sure, 1% or less due to random error. So here's your significant level, and you notice your critical value goes higher for each individual degree of freedom if you're more sure. Okay. So we're in the 5% level. And again, this is the same, if you notice, these are the same numbers that were in our lab manual that we went over a couple weeks ago. The first degree of freedom was up to 12 critical value, and then the next degree of freedom was 4.3. But what you want to know is degrees of freedom drop, the critical value drops as your degree of freedom increases. So remember, our degree of freedom was 157. Remember, our total county numbers minus 9. So we're over here, we're above 120. So let's see. If you go between 120 and infinity, it's 1.9. So remember, our t-value was like 5 something, right? So our t-value for a 5%, 5% or 95% confidence or 5% chance of error, either way you want to state it, our excuse me, our critical value is 1.9. So our t-value, being 5 something, is well above our critical value. So we're going to reject that null hypothesis that there is no difference between the means and accept the alternative hypothesis that there is a difference between the two means. Okay, so what you want to download as far as actually writing the abstract is this one here, the example abstract OASIS blank. Okay, and again, just to kind of go back, if you have a Windows machine, that t-test, everything we just did as far as doing the t-test and creating the chart is this MP4 here. You'd want to watch this video here, and that'll show you how to download everything on a Windows machine. So let's download the example abstract OASIS. And so use what I have here, okay? Use the methods, use the results, okay? Don't reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to open this, and I'll probably have to share a different screen again once I do. Okay, new share, so go to Microsoft Word. Actually, let's go to Excel. Okay, so we'll go back to Excel for just a second. So let's go how to get this graph into your abstract. So again, make sure you've got your graph selected and you have your the double-lined border, and just copy. So all you gotta do is right select it and then go to the Word document. Okay, and you guys are seeing the Word document now, right? The drug overdose death rates. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so just go somewhere down here at the end and paste, and it should paste that graph right in your Word document. And it'll probably end up showing up on the next page, which is fine. So again, you've got to write basically 3 parts. You've got to write the background, purpose, and conclusions. Okay, just keep what's already here. Keep your methods, keep the results. Okay, this is already done for you. So just again, what are the, when I was in high school, the guy that taught geometry. You used to use the acronym KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. So just keep it simple. All right. Use what we've got here. So for the background, we want to write something along the lines of why we're studying this. And I'll open up another one. Let's just open up here's one I've completed. Just bear with me for just 1 second. Example Oasis. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think, okay. And Rebecca, I can see you. You're looking at one that has the background and purpose completed, right? Filled in. Yep. Okay. All right. Good deal. Okay. So here's one that I did, and this is something along the lines of what I want you guys to write in those sections. Background, why it's important to study drug overdose death rates. Maybe one of you guys know somebody who's died of an overdose, maybe not. I know somebody I went to high school with has died of an overdose in their 40s. I mean, this is definitely not a young person's issue or anything like that. But background, why it's important. And I got this quote. I'm sure if you go to CDC's website now, it's all about the COVID-19. But last semester when I went there, one of the first things you saw on the CDC's front page, when you ask about, overdose death rates, it jumped almost 10% from 2016 to 2017. And that's a lot, really. And basically, the high rate of drug overdose deaths is a public health burden. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but a couple of years ago there was a Netflix, like a short movie about a half hour long, called Heroin, and it was heroin parentheses E. So it was like a play on words. It was heroin, the drug, parentheses E, which is heroin, the female hero, right? And this movie, it struck a lot to me because it was actually filmed in Huntington, West Virginia, where I went to college at Marshall University. And it follows three women. One's a drug court judge, one is a fire chief, and another one was a street preacher who gave out hygiene bags to women on the street. And it was following these three women and their basic roles in the heroin epidemic that was overtaking the city. And it's if you don't understand what's going on, that short little Netflix movie will really drive it home as to why this is a public health burden. So people are just dying from overdoses all the time. So the background, just a little bit of 2 or 3 sentences. Why it's important to study this, because big thing is it's a public health burden. So with the purpose. The big thing you want with the purpose is statement of the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Okay, you want to make sure you get those two things in the purpose. And again, the null and alternative hypothesis should be pretty much the same sentence with the switching of a few words. Remember, the null hypothesis predicts that there's no difference in the mean number of drug overdose death rates between the rural and non-rural counties. The alternative hypothesis states there is a difference in the mean of drug overdose death rates between rural and non-rural counties. Again, it's just very straightforward. You don't have to predict which is going to be greater or less. Just state that, again, the null predicts there's no difference. Alternative predicts there is a difference. And that's pretty much it for the purpose. Again, 2 to 3 sentences. That's it. For the methods and results, just keep those. Just copy and paste, or just use that. You can just start this in this same document and save it as a new file. With the results, again, we've got basically where we got our data from the Georgia Oasis, and I'll show you guys that here in a minute if you need. But basically, this Georgia Oasis is a website put out by the Department of Health. You can look at pregnancy rates, death rates, all sorts of statistical information about the state of Georgia. It's actually really kind of interesting. And again, the drug overdose death rates. With a rate, you define percentage as the number per 100. Well, sometimes with things like this, it's per 100,000. Okay, when you go to like city data, and you want to decide, where you're going to move later on when you get out of college or whatever. If you look at city data, you look at crime rates and rates of domestic violence or violent crimes, things like that. It's usually the number they give you is usually per 100,000 people. So that part's pretty typical. And again, so you've got your mean for each variable, the mean for the non-rural and mean for the rural. The t-value they got 5.45. Remember, it's well above our critical value of like 1.9. And the total degrees of freedom, and the p-value that we went with, which is always 0.05. Okay, and in science we use 5%. Business and stuff like that may use a different type. And again, the results state that we rejected the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis was accepted. And so with the conclusion, here's where you want, again, 2 to 3, 4 to 5 sentences, whatever you want to put. What do you think should occur based on these findings? And so the only things you have to fill out again are the background, purpose, and the conclusion. So with this, I put increased preventative education and rehabilitation opportunities in non-rural counties. Some other things you might think of for conclusions. Maybe doctor education. I don't know what you guys know about this, but I've read a lot of different things about this whole, especially the opioid overdose death rates. A lot of people who get hooked on heroin start off getting hooked on opioid painkillers that they were prescribed from a doctor. They get hurt at work, they injure themselves at work or whatever. They get prescribed a painkiller that's opioid and addictive. That prescription only lasts for so long, and they get kind of hooked on that painkiller. And when the prescription ends, they find it's easier to get heroin than it is the prescription painkiller that they were on. So maybe like doctor education and opioid alternatives. There's a lot of alternatives to opioid medication. One of the things that got me thinking about this was hearing a comedian, Wanda Sykes, talking about having a double mastectomy, have both breasts removed. She said when she was sent home from the hospital after getting a double mastectomy, they sent her home with ibuprofen as a painkiller. I mean, that's something that we can get over the counter. So it's not habit forming, it's not addictive, just kind of things like that. So kind of think of just think outside the box a little bit. What do you think could improve the situation? Okay, and that's really all you need for the conclusion. Again, just 2 to 3, 4 to 5 sentences, something like that. It doesn't have to be too elaborate. And again, make sure you paste your graph in there. And when you are done, the way you want to save this file is you want to save it with a particular name. Okay. I'm assuming you guys see this now. You guys seeing my little save window, the save dialog box coming up or no? No? Okay. All right. So I'm just going to type it in here. You do not want your name on this, but the way you want to save the file name is capital IA, inquiry and analysis, underscore BLAB underscore 1101 underscore DEM, and this is section 3. Okay, so you guys want to save the file like this. Okay, that's what Gen Ed requires for the things they're doing. So this is part of the general education assessment. So you want to save your file name like this, and then you want to email it to me and to gened@piedmont.edu. Well, that's not a P. Yeah. So email it to gened@piedmont.edu and to me. Okay. Whenever you guys get completed with this. Okay. Let's go back to Chrome, see if there's anything else that we needed to look at. So again, you download that file. That was the example abstract. The book one raw data has the numbers. Again, if you want to double check yourself, you can go, to the rubric. I'm not going to stick too hard and fast to that. Like I said, as long as you've got it halfway decent. The big things I'm going to look at when I assign grades for this is whether you have the null and alternative hypotheses stated correctly in the purpose section, and that you have the attached graph, because the graph itself is another assessment thing that we're going to look at as well. Um, and again, your t-test on Windows, you've got 2 little videos, basically how to do the t-test and create the graph as well, based on Windows or Mac. And I hope that answers all the questions. I'll stop the recording. So if you guys have